Welcome, everyone, to Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and welcome again to the Sammy Hagar Deep Dive. I'm Tim Derling. Very special guest, Johnny Bean. I mean, if you're a Van Halen fan, if you're a gearhead, you know this guy. You already follow this guy, and I'm really glad to have Johnny on here. I've been privileged to talk to Johnny before about my Sammy Hagar book, and I said, hey, you want to come on and talk about one of the albums? He agreed, and so this time around we have entered this millennium. I guess we've entered the year 2000 with 1013, which came out. It didn't come out on that date, but 1013, of course, that's Sammy's birthday of October 13th. This was
Hmm.
released on Beyond Music, which was a small label that didn't last very long. Motley Crue had albums on Beyond for a time, so did Yes, and BMG distributed them. But like I talked about, it's entering that period where veteran bands and artists were having a hard time with those major labels. In other words, they weren't getting those major label deals. So some of these albums became very hard to find. I was actually this copy I've got here, I've had since it came out because Columbia House actually had it, which was kind of surprising because it wasn't something you saw in stores all that much. So, yeah, we're here to talk about this album, and Johnny and I are going to just go through it track by track. I just want to say though, before we get into it, this was probably the nicest surprise that I had when I was researching. Going back when I was working on Red on Black, listening to all the
Hmm.
albums because I had all the albums, but sometimes I would buy them out of loyalty, listen to them a couple times, whatever, file them. Especially with the later stuff, when you get busier with life than you were when you were a teenager, and that's all you had to do was listen to your music. But when I went back and listened to all the albums, this is one that I forgot how good it was. I really really like this album, and I think it's probably my favorite after Marching to Mars of his post Van Halen albums. I think it's really consistent, but we'll get into it. What are your memories, Johnny, of this album? Because I know a lot of these albums are under the radar and went by, without much press or anything. But do you remember anything about this album at the time that it came out?
The only thing that I really remember, and this came out in 2000,
Yeah.
right? So, uh, couple things. I remember I was at I was kind of jamming with these other musicians. This was over in, I want to say, it was in Marin County, which is where Sammy happens to live, the same area. I want to say we were in like Novato or something rehearsing. It was a rehearsal space. I remember leaving the rehearsal and listening to the radio. It would have been local rock radio, which would have been, it either would have been KRQR or The Bone. Those are the two. They might have been the same channel. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But that any radio in the San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay Area, would have been either one of those channels. And I remember leaving the rehearsal, and I remember hearing the "Let Sally Drive" song on the radio. And truthfully, I think that's like the only thing I heard from the album. I unfortunately I never bought the record. Although I do recall, out here in the Bay Area, we have these excellent record shops called Amoeba Music and Rasputin's Records, and I remember seeing the CD in the bins in the Sammy Hagar section over the years. I would thumb through, and so I do recognize, let's say, the album cover, but. Seriously though, I think "Let Sally Drive" was the only song I remember hearing at the time. But I'm thinking there's a deeper kind of love. I'm thinking I would hear Sammy play maybe acoustically or something. I don't know. Like that title sticks out to me as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I got a bit about that song when we get to it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Let Sally Drive did get a little bit of airplay. So yeah, I mean, the idea behind this album, it's not a concept album per se, and it is just under the Sammy Hagar name, although it's supposedly a Sammy Hagar and the Wabaritas album, which is why I take pains in my
Hmm.
book to say, look, I'm counting these as Sammy Hagar albums because it really doesn't make much difference, how they're labeled. They tend to they just sound like a bunch of songs Sammy would come up with. Although he does have some co-writers on here. The idea is that it's his birthday. He says 10/13 is the day I was born. My birthday, your birthday. What's the difference? It's about the quest. So hey, who's to argue? And there's some pictures in here of Sammy blowing out his birthday birthday candles. The Wapari
Yeah.
there, and his wife Carrie's there. So the first song on this album is a rocker called Shaka Doobie, and in subtitles The Limit. Um, I think it's a pretty good opener. What do you think about this song?
I think it's a great opening track. Let's see. I've got some notes here. A high energy opener with driving guitar riffs. Um, yeah, I think. I mean that's something that's really important when it comes to an album is to have an opening track that kind of sets the tone of the record, at least for the era of the artist. And this one, uh, yeah, I think this was a great opening track.
And this is, I think, the only song from this album that ended up on the live Hallelujah album that he did in 2003, which is a pretty good collection of songs because it's got Montrose on there. It's got Van Halen stuff. This is Mike Anthony's on here. This is after Mike and him had gotten, had reconnected. But yeah, this song, I think it's the opening track and it makes a good opener. And it's one of those songs that you can throw at an audience, um, whether or not they're familiar with the song, and you kind of just can't help but bob your head to it. It's just a good, it's a rocking opener, and yeah, it kind of sets. I don't think it's. Sometimes you have an opener that you think, oh man, this album's going to be just rocking all the way through, and they're not. But it's a pretty rocking album from start to finish, and it keeps up as far as I'm concerned with "Let Sally Drive." I mean, so it's got a little bit of that Mustang Sally, lyrically, but I mean, hey, it's a song about it's a song about a girl driving fast. I mean, who would have thought Sammy Hagar would 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 wax poetic about such a thing, right? And yeah, I do remember this getting some rock radio play at the time, which is exciting because these older artists just were not getting radio play, and it's nice that at least for one last time. This is the last time I heard Sammy on the radio. Uh, at all, I think. No, even the chicken foot stuff. Except it's about time with Van Halen. I do remember hearing that as well. But Let
Mm-hmm.
Sally Drive, I guess we've already kind of talked about it. Yeah, that's probably, I can see why that would have been chosen as a single. It's got elements of what you'd expect from Sammy Hagar. It's a rock song about driving fast, and it doesn't. It's not a carbon copy of Can't Drive 55, but it's in. It's in part of that. You get your Trans Am and Sweet Hitchhiker, and it's just one of his driving songs, right? Bigfoot from Chickenfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Next up, though, he kind of changes it up a little bit. There is some variety on this album. Serious Juju. Let me get this out here so I know who's behind these songs. Let's see. So Sammy wrote the first two songs himself. Well, I guess he wrote this one himself as well. So Serious Juju, what are your thoughts of this one? This one's a little different.
Let's see. I've got some notes. A funky rocker with killer groove and catchy chorus. Um, yeah, that's the one. Okay, yeah, I can hear that one in my head. It's I mean I would say it's an album track. I don't know
Yeah,
if
it's
it's
not a
one
single. I wouldn't
that he
call it
ever
a single.
played live. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I don't, I
I
don't, I don't have the answer to that. I don't know, but you're right. It definitely, it's not single material per se, but it's different enough to maintain the interest. Now, the next song
mm-hmm.
is interesting. The Message. This is one. I think this is a co-write. Yeah, actually, this one is. This one is solely written by Jesse Harms, which is interesting. It's a piano based song.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have a co-write from Sammy on it, so I mean he didn't even write the lyrics. I this one I think I described this in the book as the evil twin of Right Now, because it's got
Mm-hmm.
a kind of, if the piano melody of Right Now is like, okay, play it in a minor key and change it up a little bit, I think you'd get this. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime that you have a song that I don't know if this was the case or not, but anytime you have a song where someone says, I need a song like, it's never as good as the original. I do think it's got a totally different feel to it because, Right Now is inspirational, it's anthemic. This one is more of a cautionary thing. Um, I don't know. I'm not sure. This isn't one of my favorites on the album. I classify it as interesting. What are your thoughts on the message?
Hmm. I definitely got the Right Now kind of vibe from it, but it's not. It's like Right Now because of the piano and because of the guitar parts, but it's heavier guitar. That's one thing I
Yeah,
noticed. It was much
very
heavier
much so.
guitar,
Yeah,
and that's interesting that you say that the keyboardist
yeah,
Jesse, right,
yeah,
that he wrote it. I mean, it makes sense because it does sound like it was like a piano track, um, especially with those stops with like the guitar parts, which kind of gives it a Right Now kind of thing.
yeah,
But again, it's different enough. It's like you said, the evil twin. It's like the opposite of it,
yeah,
sort of, kind of.
yeah. I know it's yeah, it's knowing, Sammy's obviously never going to not do Right Now in his live sets. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you'd try to have a song that was something like it, even though it's not a carbon copy, but it's just very close. Now the next song is
Mm-hmm.
is a song that I have heard on some form of radio, and I think this was another single, "Deeper Kind of Love." I really like this one. This is a really melodic ballad, and I'll tell you what's interesting. Where I heard this song is I used to work at a building supply store for about 7 years, and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have radio per se, but they had this satellite feed that would come on, and it would have a set bunch of songs, and then the songs would change, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of it was very predictable. But every once in a while, you'd catch something. I'd go, "Well, that's interesting." And "Deeper Kind of Love" was on. This is like 2002. This is like 2 years later, and I remember hearing that, thinking, "Oh, I'd never thought I'd hear this. Like, what a weird song to hear in such a public place like this." But I do really like the song. Now this one is interesting because Sammy co-wrote this with a guy named Larry Dvoskin, sorry. Now he's probably best known as being the songwriting partner of Al Jardine of the Beach Boys, but he's worked with Robert Plant, Sean Lennon, Bad Company, Robin Zander, Jolyn Turner, Meredith Brooks, Uli John Roth, Desmond Child, the Muppets, Annabella the Wind, Paul O'Neill with the TSO and Sabotage, and MGMT, and even Neil Sean. So, but yeah, I think it's a really good melodic song. I think this is one song on this album that, had it come out at an earlier time, might have been a hit. And I can see this as being a song that Sammy would have presented to Van Halen if he was working on a Van Halen album.
Mm.
And to that end, I think, I could be wrong, but I think that on the 2004 tour, for Best of Both Worlds, I think Sammy did this acoustically, at least at some of the Van Halen shows. I think he did this one and not, I don't know, Eagles Fly, or maybe he did them both. I don't know, but it seems to me that he brought this one. I could be wrong about that, but I think this one did have a
Yeah.
little bit longer life.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I did see them on that tour, but this title, like I out of all these songs, that title I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't think I heard the song on the radio, you know. Um, but I think it's possible he played this acoustically at some point, and I heard it somewhere, whether it
yeah,
be seeing him in concert. Because I've seen him live at least a few times since this album came out. I didn't see him on this tour. If there was a tour for this, I didn't see that. But I know I've seen him, since. And yeah, this is a song where, like you said, like some of these, like I could have heard some of these with Van Halen.
Yeah, this
Like
song.
his vocal is very much sounded the way it did on some of those Van Halen records on some of these songs on this,
Yeah,
and musically, I I could have definitely have heard that with a couple of these. Maybe let's see, the next one, number 6, actually.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that one
A
could
little
have
bit
been a
more.
Van Halen song.
Yeah, a little bit more. Deeper Kind of Love is also on the live Hallelujah album, and it was recorded at the UMB Bank Pavilion in Maryland Heights, Missouri, June 7, 2002, which means he was probably doing it on the Sam and Dave tour.
Hmm.
That was probably part of his set then. Yeah, a little bit more is it's kind of interesting because you've kind of got three balladish type songs in a row. This is where I think the sequencing could have been mixed up just a little bit, but it does sound like this sounds like something he would have done on balance. It reminds me of something like Feelin' or Deja Vu, like Take Me Back,
Mm-hmm.
Deja Vu, or
Yeah.
even a song like Amnesty is Granted, which he wrote when he was in Van Halen because Meatloaf ended up recording it, but he did it on Marching to
Mm-hmm.
Mars.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just interesting that he did kind of three slower ones in a row. But I think it's okay. Like I think it's a pretty good song.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked it, and I mean that's kind of his thing too. It's not all heavy rockers. It's
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
I mean the ballad stuff. I think his fans, one of the things about Sammy Hagar fans is they love him.
Oh
And
yeah,
I've seen it. I've gone to his shows. I've gone to appearances where he's done signings for his book, for his uh,
feel
rum,
it.
I guess.
Yeah,
And I've watched fans either interact with him. Like I have video. Actually, on my YouTube channel, I have video where I'm just like filming. I went up and I met him, and then I stood to the side and just filmed for like 10 minutes while people came up to him, and you get to see their interactions. I'll send you the link to it. And so I've seen the way his fans, they love him, and as far as putting three ballads in a row on a record, that's I don't think his fans would have any issue with that, because that's Sammy Hagar. That's his style, I think.
I don't have any problem with any of the songs. I just think it's kind of interesting that they're kind of clumped all together. But this song was co-written with a guy named James Michael, who people will know was the singer for 6 a.m. And I think he wrote a lot of what became Saints of Los Angeles from Motley Crue. But yeah, he co-wrote a
Hmm.
little bit more. And the other good thing about these three songs, they're all very different to each other. It's just they're a little bit slower in nature. But then, so far on this album, we haven't really gotten any of that, hard rock Jimmy Buffett thing that he started on Red Voodoo. We haven't really gotten into the Red Voodoo style or any of that stuff. But we're about to. The title song, and actually, this is the last Sammy Hagar album that I know of that came out on cassette. Um, and as far as I know, there's no vinyl of this. If it ever gets reissued, I'll get it. But this would be the
Hmm.
side two opener, and it's a good one. It's a celebration, and with a whole happy birthday thing, it runs the risk of being a little bit cheesy, but I don't know. Sammy can sell it. He pulls it off, and anybody that knows anything about Sammy, he's a numbers guy. He's a UFO guy, and that's part of what we love about him. He's a unique guy. He doesn't just write about cars and chicks and booze. Um, but yeah, 1013. What are your thoughts on this song?
I agree, where it can be kind of like, well, I didn't even I like for years, on Facebook, we're all in the same groups, and I'm in a Sammy Hagar group somewhere, and every year they wish you happy birthday, but they wish you happy 1013.
Yeah, it's become a thing.
And so I guess that's where that came from, is
Yeah,
this, which I never knew. I knew there was a record called this, what we're talking about. I didn't know there was a song, and I didn't know it was like a birthday song,
so that's where it would
you
have
know.
started. And the funny thing about that, And this didn't occur to me for many, many years, is that his birthday is October 13th. David Lee Roth's birthday is October 10th. Their birthdays are very close
Mm-hmm.
to each other. Doubt they've ever celebrated together, but
They
um,
should. They need
that
to have at least one birthday party together. That would be
that
awesome.
I wonder if there was a show on the tour, on the Sam and Dave tour at that date. And that's a whole other thing. That's still I've said this. That's still one of those things where if somebody came to me and said, that tour didn't actually happen. It was just a big elaborate prank. I would be like, yeah, that makes more sense to me because that didn't. I can't believe that ever happened. I would have loved to have seen it, but yeah, I think we talked about that before.
I didn't see it, although I know they played out here.
Yeah,
The only thing I remember from that era was I remember Sammy and his band, which included Michael Anthony, or Michael Anthony got up and played at least.
yeah,
This was in 2002. I remember them playing, I think they played a free show downtown San Francisco, 2002. It would have been around the time of this tour. I remember hearing about it. I didn't go to it. I would have gone to it if I would have known about it ahead of time. But again, 2002, the internet was still somewhat early
yeah,
then,
yeah.
where it wasn't like now where it's like our phones go off. Oh,
You
you
know,
know.
and then people have to understand that. Why didn't you go? I didn't know about it. Why didn't you know? It wasn't as instant as it is now.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Total different thing these days. Like
Yeah.
he put out a cookbook, right?
Yes,
Semi?
I have it.
When he did that, he was doing signings for that. He was going to do a signing in San Francisco. I was on my way to the event. I was driving up to it to go to it, and I get an alert. Because I follow Sammy Hagar, Van Halen, all these guys. I follow them on say X, on Twitter, on Facebook. So anytime there's a tweet that goes out, I get it instantly. That's how I found out about Edward Van Halen. Wolfgang had put out the tweet about his father. That's how I found out instantly about that, right? So I remember I was driving, and your phone sits on your dash, and all of a sudden a Sammy Hagar tweet goes off. Hey, Sammy has to cancel the event. He's not feeling well, and I was on my way to it.
Oh,
So I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess it's not happening. So I spent maybe a couple hours in the city anyway, just going to like Amoeba Records or whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's called. Are we having any fun yet? I've got a copy of that.
yeah. I don't have one. I would have got one at that event. That would have been cool.
So the next song's interesting, really interesting. It's called Protection, and it's a rocker, and it's a little bit more serious lyrically, but what it's become best known for is the opening of the song when Sammy sings "Lay Down Your Arms." It is exactly like the beginning of a Robert Plant song called Other Arms. And that's the exact opening line. It's sung cold. The band stops up, lay down your arms. It's the same phrasing.
Hmm.
It's crazy how close they are. It's from his second solo album, The Principle of Moments. And he was asked about it. He said it just must have been subconscious. He didn't consciously do it that way, but it's one of those things where you get something in your head and you're like, hey, that'd be a good opening line. Well, there's a reason for it because it's already been used. And I think the rest of the song's pretty good, but now I can't help it because when I first got this, I had all the Zeppelin albums. It was quite a few years before I got into all of Robert Plant's solo stuff, and I quite like most of it. But yeah, when I heard that, I'm like, that's where I've heard that before. I thought I'd heard it somewhere. It's just really weird how, yeah, and it's not even a well-known song. It's kind of you kind of have to have the album to know the song. So it's kind of an obscure song, but he must have heard it
Mm-hmm.
somewhere back there, right? I don't know how anybody who wants to make new music honestly can come up with something that doesn't sound like a million other things. There's only so many notes, it's
Everything's been done. I mean,
yeah, and in this day and
that's
age, people are so quick to lawsuits and stuff like that, and that's why you see a lot of these modern pop songs with 20 writers on them, and six of them are Cool in the Gang, that they sampled one little thing from one of their earlier songs. Or I'm just throwing that as an example, but I'm so really surprised it doesn't happen more often because like you said, I mean, every combination of notes and melodies has probably been used a long time
oh
ago.
yeah. There's nothing new. There's
Yeah,
nothing new, and but that's that's where as an artist, if you write, that's why artists they write. That's all they do. That's
Yeah.
all they do is write. That's all they do. And and well, I told you this. I told you the story when you were on my show. When we talked about your book. I somehow somebody sent me Sammy Hagar's address, like his business, like his office, and so I sent. This was back. This was back in like '99 or 2000 or something. Somebody sent me his address, and so I sent one of my tapes. I'm a musician, right? So I sent a tape to him saying, "Hey, check this out," you know. And I get the tape back sent to me from his office, and I get a letter in there. I still have it; it's here somewhere. And it was somebody from his office, and they had said, "Hey, thanks for sending this, but unfortunately, Sammy can't listen to this because it's unsolicited material." They get tapes all the time. Like you see, like I remember I when I saw Van Halen on the Balance tour, somebody threw a tape up on stage, and I remember Sammy picking it up and saying, "Hey, yeah, I'll check it out." He never did,
Yeah.
because that's the risk they take. Is they hear that, it gets stuck in their head. They write a song. Next thing you know, there's some guy. Wait a minute, I wrote that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and that's famously, Eddie always used to say in interviews, he said, he would say this up until he passed. I haven't bought a new album since Peter Gabriel's So in '86. He would always say that he never listened to new music, which for that very reason, because you could get a little bit, you know, no ill intent advised, but you hear something, you go, that sounds good. Did I come up with that? I must have, and it's this,
as
this demo tape that somebody sent in. So yeah, it's a real fine line. But I mean,
yeah,
on the other hand, how cool would it have been if one of your songs, if he'd accredited you and one of your songs ended up on this very album? Because it sounds like it's about the right time.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah. I mean, it just a lot of it depends on who you know in the music
Yeah.
business. It's like
You almost
you'd
need an
mentioned
in, right?
you'd mentioned Desmond Child's name. I
Yeah.
used to live with him.
Yeah.
So I used to see him write.
Yeah.
I used to see him write songs, and no, it's a very, like, when it comes to art, especially nowadays with the internet, anybody can do it. Anybody can record a song, put it up on the internet. There it is. People send me stuff all the time to check out, and unfortunately, a lot of times I don't listen to the stuff because, like I said, I'm an artist myself, and you, like you said, it's a fine line where I mean, you want inspiration to come from everywhere,
Right.
but these days, you have to be careful.
Yes.
And as far as like a song, like, wait a minute, that sounds exactly like something else. Like, did they mean to do that?
I have my
Maybe,
doubts. I have my
maybe
doubts
not.
because who wants to get sued?
Nobody.
So I mean, there's no guaranteeing that'll win, but it just what it does, it casts that shadow over, you know, your.
Well, you remember the well, speaking of chicken foot, you remember the Satriani song
Oh
that
yes.
Coldplay
Yeah.
put out,
Yeah. Hmm.
and the melody,
Very
it
close.
was it was identical
You could sing it over. Yeah. It was
to
if I
that.
if I could fly from his
Yeah,
album. Is there
it
love
was
in space?
identical
And it's like
to that.
da 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 da. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
you know.
I remember hearing about that. Go Sash, go get him.
Yeah, and did Coldplay hear the Satriani song? Probably. They
Yeah.
probably heard it at least back in the day.
Yeah.
Because anybody that's an artist the past 20 years, their influences were the influences from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Whatever, if
Yeah.
that
For
makes
sure.
sense.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So next up we have. I actually think this is one of the last times that Sammy's done a really fast, heavy song. It's called Three in the Middle. I really like this one. It's a drop tuning. Another thing about this album in general is I think, I think that Sammy, for the age that he is today, still sings at a pretty high level. But on this album, he's still got the Van Halen range. Like he can, he's going to go for a note. He's going to hit it. He sounds fantastic on this album. And Three in the Middle is one of
Mm-hmm.
my favorites because it's like old school, well, I don't think he did anything like this in his Geffen solo career, but it's a good heavy rocker. What are your thoughts on this one?
Let's see. I've got a note. Funk infused rocker with clever lyrics, showcasing Sammy's sense of humor and experimental edge. That's what it says
Yeah, no,
in my
it's a
notes.
little bit different, but I remember thinking it was a bit of a, Protection was a rocker, but this one was just so fast, on like it was just a little bit fast. It was kind of a wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next song on the album is the only one that I myself don't particularly care for. It's the real deal. It's kind of a bluesy song. It's got a slide guitar player named Roy Rogers, named after the singing cowboy. Not the same. Uh, and but what I don't like about this song is the way Sammy sings it. He kind of sings it in what I call an exaggerated bluesman voice. And I kind of mentioned that in the book where I'm like, dude, you got one of the best voices in rock. Use it. Nobody needs to hear you, hear you try and sing like Louis Armstrong or whatever he was trying to do. I just don't care for it myself.
Hmm. I like slide guitar,
Oh, me
so
too.
and it.
Me too. I mean, I think there was a good. I just wish he'd have sung it straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, Sammy's early influences probably are those blues singers.
Oh, yeah, I know, and
You know.
it's all me, right? It's all a block that I've got because I just love hearing the guy sing the way he sings. But uh, I just think that I don't. It almost sounded like a caricature of a blues man or something.
Hmm.
But you know, he can do whatever he wants, obviously, right? And it closes off with a song that sounds like it's going to be one of those beachside strum a guitar and sip tequila, Tropic of Capricorn, but it's not. It's a really cool melodic song. I really like this closing song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That title sounds familiar to me. So, like I said, I didn't buy this record when it came out. Um, I only really heard that one "Let Sally
That's so
Ride," I guess it's called.
yeah,
I only heard that on the radio like one time. But some of these titles do sound familiar to me, like Tropic of Capricorn. That sounds familiar. Like I've at least heard the title.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. It does have there was a TV series, there was a novel, but yeah, as a song title, it does sound familiar. And then the very last, it's not it's not credited, but there's a bit at the end because Tropic of Capricorn is listed as being 4.5 minutes long, but the actual CD brings it to 7. It's one of those ones where there's a bunch of space and then
Mm-hmm.
there's something else, and that little
That
bit of
was the
that,
thing. That
yeah,
was the thing to do back then.
yeah,
Was the hidden track.
yeah, and that
Yeah.
little instrumental that's tacked on the end is titled Maui Wowie. So there you go.
Yeah.
so So yeah, 10/13, October 13th, Sammy's birthday. Now you know where that comes from. I think that I think it's a really strong latter day Sammy album. I know it's a quarter of a century old now, but I still think it's a relatively good album from the 2000s, and I would recommend anybody check that out if they were interested in what Sammy's been up to and they want to listen to one of his studio albums. I'd say go for 10/13. And I will say this, and I don't know if if there's a new distribution deal, but in Sunrise Records, which is a Canadian record store chain, I was just at one yesterday. They had 10/13 in stock, and that's not something that would have been typical for that. So it is kind of available out there, and not all of these albums are. So I think that's one of his better latter day ones. I don't know what the folks out there think, but it's always fun talking about it. And Johnny, I want to thank you for your insights on this. It's always interesting talking to you about, because you're an artist and you've met so many different musicians and you've interacted with them. And yeah, there's a lot more. We want to have Johnny back on the show, definitely for something. But for now, don't forget Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar, album by album, all of the solo albums. Um, and yeah, we just want to I want to thank everybody for the support. I want to thank Johnny for being on. And don't forget, if you're not following Johnny, which I'm sure you all are, follow him on YouTube, follow him on X, follow him on Instagram. And yeah, he's got those posted right there. Uh, Always good content, and yeah, you never have enough good content because there's you're never too much of a good thing when it comes to good music stuff. So, John, thanks for doing this, and
Hey,
we want
thank
to thank
you.
everybody out there for watching this edition of Tim's Final Confessions. We'll see you later.